Hello, this is the first of a set of 6 videos in which I will provide a very short introduction to the Baha'i Faith. The first 2 videos will look at history, and then 2 each on beliefs and practices. The script for these videos is based on an article I wrote on the Baha'is for Graham Harvey's 2009 book, Religions in Focus, published by Equinox of London, and represents a brief summary of my introduction to the Baha'i Faith, published by Cambridge University Press in 2008. I will give the publication details of both of these books in the notes below the video. Although intended for a general audience, this introduction is written from an academic standpoint in the history and sociology of religion's traditions, and not from that of a partisan. I should point out that in the historical period covered in this first video in particular, much remains uncertain and controversial, and that even with further research is likely to remain subject to rival interpretations. I do not have the space here to address these complexities, and would refer those interested to my now quite ancient monograph, The Babi and Baha'i Religions from Messianic Shi'ism to a World Religion, first published in 1987 by Cambridge University Press, and recently reissued, where I present my own understanding of events. So, first to history. The present video deals with 2 topics. First, the early Babi movement, which preceded the emergence of the Baha'i Faith, and secondly, Baha'u'llah and the reanimation of Babism up to about 1863. The second history video will deal with events from 1863 onwards. Obviously, this entire account is extremely condensed, and I would refer you to my ancient Cambridge monograph for more detail. The Baha'i Faith developed out of the earlier Babi religion, and Babism in turn emerged as a movement within Shia Islam, particularly as it had developed in Iran. Shia Muslims are those who believe that the rightful successors to the Prophet Muhammad were a series of imams drawn from the Prophet's own family. These claims are rejected by the majority of the world's Muslims, the Sunnis, but Shi'ism has come to predominate in several parts of the Middle East, most notably Iran, where Twelver Shi'ism, following a succession of 12 imams, has been the state religion since the 16th century. According to the Twelvers, the last of these imams disappeared mysteriously while still a boy in the Iraqi city of Samarra in the Muslim year 260. That is 873-874 in the Western calendar. He remains hidden and will eventually reappear as the Mahdi, the rightly guided one, battle the forces of evil in a final apocalyptic battle, and herald the Day of Judgment. The Babi movement centered on Sayyid Ali Muhammad Shirazi, a young Iranian merchant from the southern city of Shiraz, who after a series of visionary dreams made a claim to religious authority, which was at first widely understood to be that of being the Bab, the gate to the hidden Imam. Ali Muhammad hence coming to be frequently referred to as the Bab, and his followers being labelled as Babis. Following the conversion of his first disciple in May 1844, a movement rapidly developed, Babi missionaries spreading his teachings throughout Iran and neighbouring areas of what was then Ottoman Iraq. The Babis' activities were widely seen as a challenge to the power of Islamic leaders and were soon opposed, at times with force. Meanwhile, the Bab's attempts to secure the allegiance of the Persian king, Muhammad Shah, were unavailing, and he was instead sent as a prisoner to a fortress in the remote northwest, close to the Ottoman border. Here, he made claim to be the Mahdi himself, implicitly the supreme ruler of the Shi'i world. Meanwhile, local tensions between the Babis and their opponents had developed in several parts of the country, finally leading to armed conflict close to one of the northern towns, in the confused conditions following the death of Muhammad Shah in September 1848. Fighting defensively, and inspired by the tradition of heroic martyrdom characteristic of Shi'ism, several hundred Babis fought off government forces for 7 months, until the survivors responded to a false truce and were massacred. 2 further conflicts erupted in May 1850, prompting the Prime Minister of the new king to order the execution of the Bab on the 8th or 9th of July, sources differ, in the hope that this would stem the religious fervour of his followers, which the Prime Minister blamed for the disturbances. The Bab's execution, the killing of most of the Babi leaders, and the persecution of the Babi groups that remained forced the Babis into a secretive existence, with different individuals assuming leadership of various factions. In August 1852, one of the Babi factions in Tehran determined to revenge their losses by attempting to assassinate Nasruddin Shah. The attempt proved to be a fiasco, but provoked a lightly wounded Shah to seek to extirpate the Babis altogether. Accordingly, many Babis were arrested and killed, including prominent Babis who had had nothing to do with the radical faction responsible for the attack. It seemed as if the Babi movement had been utterly destroyed. That this proved not to be the case was largely due to the activities of Mirza Hussain Ali Nuri, eventually generally known by his title Baha'u'llah, literally the glory of God. Baha'u'llah was the son of a formerly powerful notable and government official, and as such was one of the most socially prominent of the Babis. Although himself opposed to the Babi radicals, he was amongst those arrested in 1852. Thrown with other Babis into an underground prison in Tehran, the infamous Black Pit, Baha'u'llah languished for 4 months in circumstances of great suffering and degradation before being released and forced into exile. Traveling across the western mountains in the winter of 1852-53, Baha'u'llah and his family settled in Baghdad, in Iraq. After a prolonged period of spiritual retreat in the mountains of Kurdistan, from April 1854 to March 1856, Baha'u'llah set about reviving the demoralized and fractious Babi remnant, writing extensively to his co-religionists in Iran and attracting a growing circle of disciples in Baghdad. Although not making yet any explicit claim to leadership, Baha'u'llah was increasingly seen by many as the natural leader of the Babis, a situation which appears to have evoked the jealousy of his own younger half-brother, Mirza Yahya, generally known by his Babi title Subazal, the Morn of Eternity, who explicitly claimed leadership of the Babis, but led a secret existence separate from them. Much of Baha'u'llah's prominence at this time was due to his writings. These strongly conveyed his own sense of the divine presence, in part it would seem as a result of a series of visions he experienced during his imprisonment in Tehran, and as such they bore authority, and gave renewed hope and purpose to the demoralized Babis. Baha'u'llah's writings also gave the Babis a new vision of their religion. He emphasized in particular the importance of the spiritual mystical path and the ethical demands of belief, themes which were of interest to Sufis as well as Babis. He also provided the Babis with an explanatory framework whereby they could see the persecution and execution of the Bab as the latest chapter in human rejection of God's messengers, caused, as in the past, by the superficiality and fanaticism of those who awaited, but eventually persecuted, their promised one, together with the fears by religious leaders that they might lose their power. The resultant reanimation of the Babi movement attracted the attention of the Iranian government, which requested the Ottomans to return Baha'u'llah to his native land. Instead, the Ottoman government invited Baha'u'llah to travel to Istanbul, initially showing him favor, perhaps in the hope that he would become their tool, but subsequently rejecting him and subjecting him to further exile, to the city of Edirne in Ottoman Europe. I will continue this account in the next video. Thank you.